Hi, it's Scott from the Electric Recording Lab again. Just continuing on in the series, I started looking at preparing for the studio, and we looked at pre-production and recording drums so far, and now in the process looking at what's the next stage is, and that's building our kind of harmonic bed for our vocal to live on. So typically after drums, the first thing that we would look at is whatever bass element we're going to use, so be that guitar or keyboards or double bass or a combination of those things. Layering a keyboard bass with an electric bass is not an uncommon thing to do. So we would be getting that element next. And in my process here, it would often be, if we're doing multiple songs, there would be kind of still a batch approach to that, where we go across all of the songs and we get our bass bed down. And then we look at what's the main instrument, what's the heart of the song sort of sonically. And so, typically what would be in that sort of space, the main sort of harmonic content would be either acoustic guitar, electric guitar, or piano. They're sort of the three traditional drivers in that space in a song. So that would be the next element to come in, and we get that down. And we might be here from this perspective, building the song up to the end, or looking at doing, a batch recording across. But being careful as we move across, if we are kind of go, let's just do acoustic guitars, that we're not just sort of taking a cookie cutter approach and just going, right, here's my acoustic guitar sound, and now let's do that across all the songs. Sometimes we want some variance, we want a different color in different songs. So we do need to think along those sorts of lines as well. Now, when it comes to guitars, bass and or acoustic and electric, one of the big things we need to remember is tuning all the time. Tuning. In between takes, check your tune. It's a really important consideration to have in. And, before you're coming in, some of the prep that you should be thinking about, like often with guitars, we double them. Acoustic guitars, electric guitars, the big sort of wall of guitar sound is, we track the same thing and we pan it out hard left and right. And then you go and try and play exactly the same thing, which is really important to this. And then you realize you don't really know the rhythmic pattern that you've chosen through that song. I mean, I find that hard. I don't play acoustic a lot, but when I do, your strumming patterns and getting them right, because you're being super expressive on your first pass, and then on your second pass you go, oh, did I up or did I, what did I do through that sort of section? So having that sort of clear is going to be a really useful thing. It's super distracting when it's not clear. Like this guy's doing something slightly different to that, and not always. It'll be together, and then this guy's done something different for half a bar or something. The listener will hear that. Even in a dense mix, it'll be, why is that? The eyes will turn away and it'll be distracting. And they're the things that we'd be wanting to fix as we go through and pay particular attention to. So having that sort of practiced up front and having that sort of mindset before you come in of, I really need to kind of know this bit really well, would be important. It'll speed the process along and reduce some of your anxiety in the studio. One of the things we want to avoid is red light fever. That's where you tense up when we hit record. We don't want you that. I want you in your heart and not so much in your head when you're actually recording. I want you to express something as opposed to think your way through a performance. So doing that work up front is really important. So one of the questions that gets asked often is about new strings. And on bass guitar, obviously that's a more considerable investment than on an acoustic or an electric guitar. And, there's various schools of thought on that. The sort of dull sound that can come from older strings is definitely our sound, and it might be really working in whatever genre you're doing, and you might be really digging that sound. So then don't. Why would you? I saw an interview with Sylvia Massey, famous, record producer, engineer extraordinaire, and she had a a bass in her collection that was from the 1970s, and part of the deal with that bass was it had the original strings on it, so 50-year-old strings. And literally her comment was, well, if we break a string, we'll have to sell the bass. Again, genre dependent. A lot of people like to change strings for that extra zing on a bass guitar. And one of the things we're often doing with bass is we're adding a bit of overdrive, a bit of dirt on it. And even in, acoustic genres where there's an electric bass, we still do that to a degree. I mean, it's never obvious in a mix in those sorts of genres. It actually helps the bass to sit in a mix a little bit better when we add that little bit of extra drive. So the zing on a string actually really works in well with drives. But if you are going to change strings, don't change them while you're here, change them before. Same with electric guitar strings. I mean, I prefer, strings that are a day or two old. I don't like them, straight out of the pack on the guitar. I like a little bit of wear on them. Plus it helps to stretch them in and, give them a bit of a play so that the tuning is a little bit more stable on them. Good guitar, good strings should settle pretty quick, but there can still be a little bit of extra sort of give and take on strings in that first sort of 24 hours. So it's good to kind of get them on and get them stretched in well and truly and played on a bit so that the very high end of that, some of that new string sound comes off. That's my preference. You like that, then do change your strings the night before, just get them good and stretched in before you come in. And then the other thing that we would add at this point is keyboards and synths. And here we're looking at color, and again, depends on the genre. You might have a predominantly synth-based or a keyboard-based sound in what you're doing. But we would be thinking about what sort of elements can we add, like pads and little extra elements with synths. It's surprising how many little octave parts are in even quite rocky songs sitting under choruses, just to add a little bit of pop, in sections. So that's sort of typically the next stage. Looking at those sorts of elements, we're sticking in our main harmonic bed, being acoustic, electric, piano, that sort of thing, and then starting to layer in some of the other aspects. Now, it's really important, everything that we stick in a recording has to have a purpose. If there's no purpose to a thing, it shouldn't be there. Like, as in, is it adding something harmonically to the song? Like, is it different notes? Having a little line that sits against chords. I love doing that sort of stuff where you've got your main sort of rhythm chords and then just like an octave line or a single note line that lives under that, or a muted thing that's sort of adding to the rhythmic element of those, the strum pattern or the chord changes or the riff or whatever it is, like a tuned bongo almost, Steve Lukather style. So those are the things that we're sticking in, and keyboards to kind of, blend in and fill out sort of parts and make them fuller and give them a bit more body or give them a bit of zing at a point. It's just so that we've got those dynamics and we've got all that sort of shape in the main body of the song. Then once we've got those bits in, then we're ready to start putting vocals on top. Remember, this is sort of the focus, the vocal, that's the thing that why we're here. Is to put this vocal on top. And we've done all this sort of stuff to kind of sit this in its rightful place so that everyone's interested and they're seated and listening and engaged with the singer. That's the job of all those other parts. So as I say, everything has to have a role and it's all pointing it up towards that vocal or pointing the listener towards that vocal. All right, so hope that's helpful. I will do one more thing, I think, on looking at vocals and perhaps a bit of additional recording as well. All right, make great art and stay safe. See you later.